Welcome to Scott Plus Plus. Today I'm joined by my friend Eissa from Journey to Programming, and we're going to go again into Reddit startup ideas, look at some of the best ideas over the last month, and we'll comment about what we think are the best ideas, maybe the technical challenges, and what we would approach for an MVP. All of that right after the intro. Eissa, you want to say any intro words?
No, I think you covered it for the most part, Scott. I mean, again, I'm Eissa from Journey to Programming, and I've kind of been holding my videos and podcasts for several years now. Not very consistent with it, but for those that have checked it out, please do keep checking it out. I'm trying to put videos out a little more consistently, and hopefully this collab we've got going here will be a great way for us to both share our knowledge and share some interesting discussions. So let's do it.
Generate ads in seconds with AI. Clickable enables marketers to generate beautiful, brand consistent, and highly converting ads for all marketing channels in a matter of seconds. No design experience needed. This is interesting. You just put in the URL and they grab all the ad details for you. That's some interesting tech that you could apply not just to this, right? To a lot of things.
Until you get in trouble for crawling every site. And
Yes.
you begin getting some IT kind of domain issues and such.
And that is interesting. Like, I would imagine there are a lot of cases when you're wanting to do some advertising and maybe prepare some ads that might be for like a new branding rollout, right? I assume they have ways to take like assets and whatnot, not just from the public facing URL, right?
I would think so. I think this is super interesting in the case where you have some sort of vision and you've got an idea, but you don't want to go and create or gather your own assets and your own samples.
Yeah.
You could easily, if you're not as marketing inclined or arts kind of design inclined, you could just go ahead and get a whole bunch of reference links to brands you like and let them build off of that. But what I'm curious about, based on this, are they just stripping content and throwing it together and putting them all in? Basically, you're stripping some content from Dunkin' Donuts, stripping some directly from like Starbucks website because your business sells coffee as well. You do it from another company is on top of that, and then they're just taking bits and pieces and piecing it into a kind of a puzzle or like a three-step various things fit into it. If you understand what I'm saying, like, is there copyright infringement there, or are we looking at some other issues? I think it's super interesting, and I would love this because I'm not good at creating copy, and nor am I good at creating digital assets. But I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
I feel like it's meant to be targeting your own brand. I think this is like from the perspective of you're the marketing manager at Dunkin' Donuts. And so you're pointing it to your own website, so it's going to grab all your colors, your style, whatever, by scraping your own website. And then it's going to create ads for you based on this little description. Kind of like the what's that new thing, DALL-E, or that new AI that does like art just from a description? Like kind of like that, but for ads.
Understood. Okay. So you're looking at this replacing a marketing team or some marketing expert in the case you already have a brand and you've already got things established.
Yeah.
Understood.
Now, I would imagine it's flexible, right? So if you wanted to go from scratch, like theoretically they could do that, right? Because it would be interesting to understand what they are taking from this brand, right? Do you just need do you need the logo, or can you just give them like colors, a color palette, or what all do they need to do this?
Yeah, I would love to be able to click through. I'm curious, do they have a prototype set up, or are they literally a landing page right now?
I mean, I feel like they're a landing page. Let's see, what does it say here? Sign up for early access. If they have a Twitter, no, their Twitter link is not a link, it just says Twitter. If I were them and this was working, right, I would probably be tweeting once a day of like the best thing that one of our customers like created, right? Or like a fake version. Because theoretically, if they have it set out, you can crank out new ads all the time. And as long as they can do this with some good quality, right, then theoretically it's great. Especially, I would see this better targeting like small, medium businesses rather than something as large as like Dunkin'.
Of course.
Right? Like, if you're going to, obviously creating the ad is one side of it, but then you're spending, up to millions of dollars, like, driving people to this ad. So if you do that, you probably want to, like, hand curate exactly what that ad is and make sure it's going to have, like, the impact that you want and, present your brand that goes along with your brand story and whatnot, which I don't imagine the AI generated ones are going to do as well.
That's probably true. I mean, I'm still curious about how this will end up working because, again, obviously I'm interested. And like you said, I agree, probably medium-sized businesses are maybe the bread and butter to an extent. But even then, my concern here is in the world of like personalization and really having ads that are customized, will this successfully fill that gap? I don't know. But what I'm really curious about still is the under the hood. So now, what I loved about like your last episode, you started breaking this down under the hood, and I'd love for us to open up, like, what do you think they're actually doing here, though? So you mentioned they're probably taking that URL, doing some probably crawling and seeing what's going on. But now, how are they actually utilizing AI here? Is it like a supervised model that they're using, and they're just retraining it every day? What do we think is actually happening?
That's a great question. I wish I knew more about how DALL-E works and what are the optimizing functions they're using.
I've got to pull up DALL-E. Is it like is it like a DALL-E that you move a camera on? What is it?
Right. So this is DALL-E. Create original, realistic images and art from a text description. It can combine concepts, attributes, and styles. So they've trained this model on millions of actual pieces of art. And then now you're able to just like type something in and it's going to generate something for you.
Okay, so this is a big classification game then. So you've got a lot of either pieces that have already been broken down and classified. So for example, looking at that image, and we're probably looking, okay, the horse has a classification, the astronaut has a few classifications, maybe the rug on top of the horse if it's not baked into that image, the background images, kind of the same as we're looking at people creating NFTs nowadays, right?
Ooh. Yeah, in what way?
So, I mean, this is obviously trying to generate based on a text description that you're creating. So we're calling it AI. We've trained some models to believe classification problems and classified images to be able to build into this like composition. But with NFTs, when you look at something like Bored Ape Club, right? Or a lot of these large NFT sets of 50,000 images that are literally just objects with layers on them, and they're randomizing through sets. It's not exactly the same. It's just a layered composition. They're doing a randomization between the actual objects, which have been classified one way or the other, and then they're kind of put out there's an NFT set that somehow is worth unimaginable amounts of money sometimes.
What I would be curious about for DALL-E, and I don't know the answer to this, is it just like cutting things out? Like when here we have an astronaut on a horse, right? Now, obviously they've been fed million images of horses, right?
Where are they even getting these images from? Is my question.
And it's like, if they don't have, like, there was never an initial image of an astronaut on a horse, right? So to have an astronaut in that pose, right, where he's, his legs are open and bending over, that is interesting how they come with that, right? Because it has to be more than just, finding the one image of an astronaut they had in that pose, because I don't know that there would have been such a thing from the input. And so are they able to have some sort of like 3D model behind this of these objects, and so then they have different poses that they can put them in, and then once they have that, able to convert that to a a style, right? Or like basically taking images of astronauts and then, each, kind of like a ragdoll situation, right? So it's like taking the leg and taking the leg to like mold it over to fit into the pose. I don't know.
I think it's just a super interesting question. I know from my standpoint, I very strongly question that they're actually doing like the rendering from scratch or drawing anything. I very strongly question it. So I just pulled up a quick Google search. Seems like it's a very common combination of terms to search. And I see a lot of astronaut on a horse. Yes. Astronaut riding horse is a very common thing. I don't know where it came from. If anybody listening knows, please do answer on Scott's video so we can find out, because this is still like blowing my mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, if they do have the image, it would be interesting to see the extent, right, of how well they can change things in 3 dimensions from like and diverge from whatever input they had, right?
Definitely.
Because if they had this picture of an astronaut and more or less this pose somewhere, and they're just like combining with different images and finding the tones and whatnot that kind of match, then it's less impressive.
Still super interesting. I mean, going back to the actual Clickable business model here. So I'm still super interested to see how this works out. I think it's a very interesting idea. I'm just wondering if I buy how well it's going to work. It's kind of like have you used Canva before for your work?
I mean, not for anything like professionally, but I've dabbled with it.
Yeah. So whenever I use Canva, and I've used it quite a bit, I'll take something that's ready-made and it looks great, and then I make it look horrible because I customize it. Is this going to turn out to be one of those situations? Is what sits in my head, and I'm wondering if they can really delineate themselves from that concept.
Yeah, I assume so. So it would be interesting. So obviously, if they just have all those templates similar to Canva, and then they just like plug in your colors and your text and your logos and an image of a donut apparently in every possible combination, that's straightforward. But if they have a algorithm to decide which of these are better, right? That this is a good ad and this is a bad ad, and how they went about training that would be interesting to dive into.
Absolutely. And I guess that's where I'm wondering, from your standpoint, do you think that is feasible from your experience and your knowledge? Do you think that's what's going on here? Do you buy it from the website? I don't know. Clickable team, I am skeptical right now.
So whether or not they have it, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to discuss how you could build that.
Okay.
And theoretically, if you plugged into something like Facebook ads or whatever, and then the algorithm is actually your click-through rate, right? And so if you take all these things and you generate, 1,000 different, iterations from these different combinations, and then actually create those ads and put them out there and see what your click-through rate is, and that can then train the AI to better understand what is a good ad and what is a bad ad, right?
That's a great point. I think that's a great call out. So, again, I'm just curious to see where this ends up for this team. And I'm not too sure. I know it would definitely help me if I had this opportunity to use it. So if Clickable, you're listening, if you guys need a test person, feel free to reach out.
They do. They want you to sign up.
All right, maybe I'll have to do a join the wait list. If you guys start spamming me, though, I don't know, man. I think I kind of threw us on a tangent, which is my signature. So I wanted to reel back to it.
All right, Eissa. So if you were in charge and you were building this from scratch, and let's assume that right now they just have a landing page, right? And you wanted to build out an MVP to give to the first set of testers, how maybe would you go about doing that? What would be your priorities, etc.?
Oh gosh. So if you wanted me to go really lean and mean with this, I could tell you I would do this really manually in the beginning.
Wizard of Oz style.
What do you mean by Wizard of Oz style? I'm curious.
Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain, right?
Yeah.
So you think it's this great big like AI that's doing things, but really you just got a guy back there, and every time an ad comes in, he's like manually putting things together.
Exactly, and the reason for it is, I mean, at this moment, it's a landing page. If I'm a small team, a small business, me spinning up all of the services necessary, putting in all the time for the logic on something which is not proven is really hard. And as you know, as most people who have gone through the startup kind of experience, even if you've got a great idea, it doesn't mean you're going to make money. So if it did mean you're going to make money just off a great idea, then I'd be a multi-millionaire right now, maybe a billionaire. But obviously, I'm not there yet. So I would what I've learned over the years is I try not to engineer too much in the beginning, and I try to think about how do I get to an MVP, even if I've got, like you said, the Wizard of Oz kind of style going on. So what I would maybe do here is I would start opening up this exact process, right? So go ahead, set up accounts, give people access, and then begin letting them submit their URL, submit their brand details, and then let's start mocking this up in the background. Let's have like a team of folks. If you need, just go to like Fiverr, have like 5 contractors all on call, and begin just generating that. And you're going to eat the cost. Obviously, you're going to eat the cost, but that's going to be a proof of concept for you, which then if you start seeing traction, then you start building it off of that. And then what you can maybe do is keep those contractors on, basically on call as you begin scaling into actually your AI models and utilizing the logic. And they're always available for like ad hoc work. You never know when you're going to realize the first 3, 5, 10 versions of your actual logic end up sucking and they break, right? So that's the way I would go about it. And that also gets you really close, I think, to the customers, because you're going to be so in the details, reviewing everything, and making sure even your contractors who are doing the artwork are meeting those expectations. You're going to learn and improve. But that's just my idea.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely the way to go, because if you have the situation where you can validate the business idea and see that you have product market fit before having to build anything, that's ideal, right? The question now, though, is what kind of runway, like how long do you think you would need to be able to sustain that? Because theoretically, while you're doing this, you're going to come to a point, first you're like, not sure, do we have product market fit or not? Eventually you're going to get to a point where like, hey, yes we do. How long do you think you need for that? Because that's going to say like how much time you need to be basically burning through funds doing this all manually before you find that info.
Man, so throwing me on the spot. So the way I would think about this, if I were thinking about runway, is if I'm the startup founder, I want to get this business running as quickly as possible, unless I'm filthy rich, in which case I could probably build it by making a team, right? But in most cases, I think you're trying to do this as lean as possible, right? So thinking about it that way, I'm trying to think of, okay, getting this going and hiring contractors to support it, you're probably going to need at least, I'd say, 6 months to a year of runway. And I'm thinking in terms of that, you're probably going to need, at the low end, if you're hiring people for super cheap, which I don't want to encourage or discourage. So for example, if you're in the US and you're hiring people overseas, you're probably going to find rates for maybe designers in the sub $20 per hour type of range, which I don't know exactly how to translate over to design work, because getting maybe a brand page put together could be multiple hours. Maybe they do a per asset price and you set up a deal with them. Nevertheless, imagine you're doing that. Imagine you recruit 10 testers over your first month or so, and you're going to begin eating this cost in maybe month 2 or 3. Say you end up doing that and these customers need a lot of work. You're probably going to need at least, I don't know, $10 to $20,000 for the first like 6 months just to pay these contractors who are super cheap. Because if you hire anybody in the States and you're paying them even on a contract rate, I mean, it's going to be hard to find people where they'll be willing to be doing work for as low of a rate as overseas. But again, this is all kind of hypothetical, and all these numbers are hypothetical, and that's going lean, I think. So say 15 to 20K runway for 6 months to a year. That's super, super lean, and that's expecting you're only sending work to these people to do on demand, and you don't have them hired on like a retainer. You don't have them on like a full-time, part-time basis. So that's rough. But now, if you could turn that into you spending that entire time trying to do the information gathering with these test users of yours, you're basically your clients, and you're selling, that's where the money comes back. And that's where I probably hit the biggest hurdles when I've gone through kind of startups of my own in the past, whether it be a SaaS startup or like a order e-commerce type site. In the past, I think the biggest blocker I've run into when trying to keep my runway small is I've tried to do everything. And that you just run into a freaking brick wall, because you can't create everything, in my opinion, and then also sell at the same time and create all of your marketing assets and the logic of your engineering work. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, are there any other details to dive into? Go for it.
Could you elaborate on what you mean by not being able to do everything? Obviously, you're going to be having these customers coming in. You have it set up for your contractors to provide value, right? And that's how you're finding product market fit. What are the other things you need to be doing, and when would you suggest to be doing them?
Oh gosh, so at this point, if you're just kicking off and you want to keep your runway alive and you don't want to go under, there's so many things that you're going to have to kind of prioritize here. So you start the business, now there's going to be a question of, okay, legalities. Are you allowed to sell? Do you need to formally organize anything? That's one question. Let's imagine you're ignoring all that right now. You don't make money, and the repercussions to doing that right now are really not going to be criminal. It's going to be a slap on the wrist and fines, and if you don't make money, you don't really have them. So that's kind of how businesses will end up working.
What do you see as the legal challenges or things that you need to resolve?
So as you start going into any business, if you start going into anything that's selling here, you're looking at potential risks, right? You've got customers, you've got them potentially paying for a product, maybe not in the beginning, you've got test users, but you're going to scale to that point, right? You've got additionally money that you're putting into this, which if you don't have a legal entity, you're going to have to at least do it as like a sole proprietor. So you do it underneath your own account that has taxable type information where if you're writing things off, you can write it off, and that becomes a business technically. But so you are running a business at that point. But then there's the risks involved there. What if you actually set this up, and from a legal side, you do get some test users and you provide assets to them, but your contractors are actually copying maybe some copyrighted materials or something like that, and your client, your customers who are testing for you don't identify it. You don't identify it. Mistakes happen, and then they get slapped with some sort of fine or some not a DNC, basically a take it down type warning from the actual company who finds out, which if they're tiny, it's unlikely anyone's going to find it. You just don't want to be in that situation. So again, those are all big risks. And then you've got other aspects to it of, okay, now if you are starting to buy any kind of services, sometimes I know like AWS doesn't care if you're doing some back-end services there. You can just spin up your own account and start paying. For the most part, you don't have to have like a business IAN tied to it for the legalities or the actual business reasoning. But all of that is stuff you want to start thinking about, especially as a business owner. And if you want to be able to scale it, you're going to have to do it. You can outsource it, but if you are super lean, you're just going to do it yourself because it's not hard to do. So those are the risks I'm talking about there. There's probably stuff that was in my head that I missed, but that's one thing. And that's honestly my lowest priority after my experiences, because I don't think you're going to run into issues in the beginning. I think your first hurdle, find people to use your stuff. So now your first priority, in my opinion, when you're like starting this, is you need to be selling. You need to be finding users. That means marketing. You've got to be generating, in my opinion, content on LinkedIn, content on Twitter, content on any platform you think your clients are.
The beauty of this is you're supposed to be building a system that makes it easy for you to generate ads, right?
Exactly. You are, but who's your client and where do they hang out is the big question, right? And if you're targeting mid-sized businesses where you probably do have a gatekeeper in front of you to get to the person that's going to buy your tools, then you need to be advertising where they're looking at regular professional material, and then you need to stand out there. So hopefully you're building this entire system to generate marketing materials, but hopefully you've got the design chops and you can use the contractors you're hiring as your testers to generate that content. But that's cost too. Yeah. So again, those are big things. And then going from there, you've got to hire people and you've got to make sure their quality's up to par and that they understand what they need to do. And setting up that process is never as straightforward as you want it to be. And you go through uphill battles. So those are all going to be super kind of rough things to do and balance. And then you've got to engineer your solution and adjust, which at this time, if you're offloading it to contractors, you're doing the Wizard of Oz. You need to pivot the way they're building things dynamically based on the feedback you're working with your customers on. And you need to go through the ruthless decisions. Maybe a contractor you have is not fitting in well. Maybe they're not following the process. So again, you're going through like hiring, firing. And that's related to the engineering, which you're potentially going to be doing later on. So there's like weird contextual flows that you're going to have to understand that roll back to your smoke and mirrors engineering work that's going on. And you still have to develop a product. So again, you're doing smoke and mirrors right here. You still need to scale your product into something that works. And once you're able to do that, obviously, say 6 months, a year down the line, as it begins working well, you're able to start reducing the cost of hiring manual contractors, and you're able to maybe start saving money and scaling up your actual system. But then you've got the cost of servers and data storage. So now you've got other issues to deal with. And there's so many things to play with here. But again, what do you think? I mean, do you think that I've kind of thrown the concerns out there properly? Was there anything specifically missed?
I mean, yeah, those are all things that you're going to have to deal with. I think you're going to have to deal with that, like, with any type of startup, right? Those are kind of like global concerns. So just be aware, just be aware of that for everyone who like is looking to start their business, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the plus side of this business, if you do start it very lean, you don't need to have a ton of web services spun up. You really just need like a landing page. You need to set up a basic form. And then you need to set up a way for your clients to actually look at the ads you guys have generated and select one, or select whichever ones they want to keep or kick back.
Yeah.
So I would almost think this could be, there's probably GitHub projects, which are open source that people could probably find and reuse to fit into this. I would definitely think. Maybe a rating, something where there's a gallery and people can rate and thumbs up and thumbs down, then reuse that to actually be tied to a user that's logged in, and based on that judgment they cast, it basically kicks it back for review and editing, etc. I'm almost thinking like a Fiverr system or an Upwork system where you've got communication built into it.
Shifting to talk about the tech a little bit. Once we get to the point where it's like, okay, we validated product market fit, we actually want to start building this thing, and maybe even like halfway along the way, we might start thinking about this. I'm almost thinking just to start with templating rather than like hardcore AI, and build the system that can generate every iteration based on the text, logos, and whatnot provided, right? Like with Canva, you have kind of the templates that you start with, you have the themes, and you can do the color palettes and whatnot, and you have different layouts. If you can build something like that then just puts out all the possibilities on a page for someone to look at and choose the best ones. Because theoretically, then you can start having your contractors that you're doing to, who are creating the handcrafted ads for now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can start transitioning them to be working with the system that does all the automated templating
Yeah.
and choosing the best ones. And that's going to gradually lower, like over time, that's going to reduce the amount of work that they need to be doing, uh, while you can put other people on building out more templates and more options.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call out. I think my only concern is I would not necessarily want to make it customer facing. So giving them
Sure.
too much would be a problem
Right.
in my opinion. But it sounds like we're talking about internal tools.
Yeah. Internal tools, and I think so. An internal tool that kind of assists the smoke and mirrors is like we actually have a person doing this for you, who right, and gradually that can they can feed into one another. So as maybe we have a system where automated, it takes through all the templates, it takes the colors and logos and whatnot that were provided, generates all the options. Then we have an actual person, not the customer, but internal, go through and like choose the top 10, for example, right? Show that to the customer and say, okay, here are the ones that we thought of. Maybe they do any tweaks that they think are important, right? And then somehow have a way to capture those.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely would be useful. I mean, especially if you're hiring contractors and trying to train them to be able to do this quickly. So that sounds really good plan right there.
Yeah, and then we have some feedback loops as the contractors are choosing which ones are the best, right? We want to make sure that we're capturing that data and applying those to the templates or the colors or whatever we can to get more data about what works and what doesn't automatedly. And then similarly, when we show that to the client and we figure out, okay, they chose these ones as the best, and we can start aggregating this data so we can start making at least some educated guesses, right? Once we start creating like every possible iteration, we can say, okay, based on the data we have so far, we think these 10 are probably the best, right? With some sort of confidence based on, you know, how often these color combinations are chosen with this type of template or whatnot. And gradually this thing starts to get better and better at doing it and working by itself, right? And so like a gradual method rather than building an AI from scratch and like saying, okay, here's the AI and it can do this, right? You have this AI human working together gradually until the AI gets good enough to kind of do it on its own.
Yeah, and you're gradually training your model, refreshing it. Yeah, no, I think that's a super interesting and really good way to do it. I'm curious, what do you think the time and effort would be to start building that, and would you have the time to do it? I mean, if you're also the owner here, would you need to get somebody to help implement, or are you gonna just work constantly?
No, I think I mean obviously it depends on your skill set as the owner and what you're doing with this. And I think there are kind of different skills needed at different parts of it. I don't think it's something you would want to do by yourself. But if I broke it into like kind of milestones, one would be the system. Well, obviously first is like just the sign up page to gauge initial interest, right? With no product at all. Then we have the stage where we have, okay, taking orders, sending it to contractors, they're doing it like just to see if we can actually like generate revenue from this type of service.
Yeah.
Then we build this system. The contractors, when there's downtime, so I'm talking about like the designers, when there's downtime, we don't have orders. Now they can start building out templates, right? And we need to build that system where given some sort of template and a bunch of assets, it can then create all the different combinations, right?
Interesting. I guess my question is, and this is maybe a good one, if the Clickable team listens in, how do you get these work streams put together? Because you just mentioned so many work streams which really intermingle and they work together, but you've got not just you and a few people who are like founders and tech people on here. You've got potentially just designers and artists that are your contractors here. Do you have an kind of like a couple of engineers on the side who are contractors as well, ready to go? Or are you going to train these contractors that are just doing ad hoc images for you and copy to then when they're not getting active work, you've got jobs that you're sending them to work towards classifications. I guess that's where I would be curious. Like, how do you set up these workflows, and where does that fit into the runway question right back at you that you asked me?
Yeah. You would probably want a small team of engineers working on this full time as a product, not worrying about after we get there, but just building this templating system in a way that is easy enough for designers to work on, because it is absolutely a collaboration of those two worlds, kind of like the art and the tech, and they have to work together. And so I would imagine you could get something very rudimentary that just takes some basic, like here, if you look at their custom one here, okay, we've got obviously the size of the ads that we're creating. We've got the top is one color, the bottom's another color. We got a hero image, we got some text, we got a call to action, right? And so each of those can be kind of arranged on a page, even if, like, to begin with, if the artist is basically sending a board to the tech guys just literally grab the XY coordinates of the things that they think are important and use some just JSON or XML to, like, this is a template now, right? And then gradually create a collection or a catalog of those, as well as color palettes, as well as hero images and calls to action and text and things like that, right? So I do think it is going to take a lot of work. It is going to take a few months of people probably working on this full time until you have that system. But I don't think that's unrealistic, right? Or
no, not at all. What do you think that runway would be, though? What is your estimate on costs? Imagine you're doing it stateside, within the United States, or overseas, or it's kind of a mixture of people.
I think realistically, I would put 2 engineers on this full time, as well as, and for like a couple months, right? And again, just talking now about the system of templating. So the input is our hero image, our color palette, and maybe some text, right? And I'm skipping the whole thing about AI generated slogans, right? I'm assuming that they're gonna, let's focus just on the visuals right now, not necessarily the copy. That can be a separate system. But if we're just talking about the visuals and laying those out, and so the input is that we have like a back end, or rather an internal facing tool where the designers can go and upload the images, press a button, and it's going to give them all the possible iterations, right? Just for that, 2 months of engineers, and depending on how fastly and how many different iterations you want to do, I would say let's make it even and put 2 designers on that as well for a couple months. And I think that would get you started, right? Till you have that point where it starts to make it easier now for your designer contractors to send options back to the clients.
I definitely think that sounds reasonable. So I'm curious, can you put like a dollar amount to what this would cost? Because I like we're doing right now. We found this on Reddit. A lot of the times I've found startups that are trying to post to Reddit. They're trying to get validated to determine how much they should be spending, whatever, if their idea is even worth it. And then if this person's non-technical, I'm sure they're wondering, like, okay, how much is it going to cost me to get this engineered? And once they see a label to that, oh man, that's always fun. Because I'm sure you've gone through this experience in the past. You've had people reach out to you asking if you can develop this genius idea. And then they're like, oh, I'll give you some kind of commission or some ownership, right? Equity. What do you think this would cost? Because I've got a rough number in my head for stateside versus overseas. Well, I'm curious.
Right. So I think I want to add some clarification first. I think
it doesn't have to be perfect. It could be just a number thrown out there.
So I think they're different. So there are different ways to approach it. So one, you can look at the bigger picture and think, okay, we want to build this long term. So yes, we first want to build this first iteration of the system, but we want those same people to be with us and grow to like the full vision. If that's the case, right, then you want to focus on getting at least that one tech lead who's going to go with you all the way. And I think it would be worth your while to spend more on him than on someone who's just going to deliver this project as it is, and then you never see them again, and it's now a pain to now connect it to and evolve it to the next level, right? So I would, like, ideally, right? Find someone really good who's gonna oversee that vision, and then you can have a junior person kind of working with him, or another contractor overseas who's a little less expensive. For the senior level, I would hope, again, so you're not hopefully paying like Bay Area prices, or if so, you're doing it with some like potential shares or whatever. 200K for a year, top most. Hopefully part of that can include equity, and so then divide that by 6, right, to get a couple months. Right, so that's a lot. Like, probably you can find someone who's going to do it for cheaper, but that would probably be like the upper bound. And then probably half that for the junior guy who's helping with this. So I didn't do that math, but let's what did I just throw out here?
200 plus half of 200.
Yeah. 50K. You know what? I could do it for cheaper than that. But that's
shameless plug.
That's the
shameless plug to Clickable.
Yeah.
I like it.
But that's probably the upper bound, right?
And this doesn't really include any of the AI modeling and any of that, right? This is basically MVP status, and this is the price you would estimate for if you were to be hiring basically that senior, that lead, who would maybe you'd retain long term, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
If you are able to oversee a team and you know exactly what you want, and you're like, just build me this, right? And then we'll worry about the future later. Maybe you can get away with a couple more like junior engineers, and you can drop that price by half, and then more if you're gonna work, overseas. And some of that, like ideally, if you are finding this person who wants to grow with you and take kind of ownership of the project, which is ideal, then you can convert some of that payment into the form of equity or ownership of the company.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Just feeding off of that, I mean, I feel like it's super high to be paying because you're a startup. I mean, to have that much runway and be able to sustain, I think that's super difficult unless you've already got some kind of angel in your back pocket or some VC funding or something. I think this is a very rough one. I think based on where the page is at, which is just a landing page, I'm suspecting that this person doesn't, unless they are rich. I mean, maybe they've got a bank fund already. They've got a huge bankroll. I mean, in my head, I'm thinking I would go about this super scrappy, get this working as scrappy as possible, and then look at getting a real team to go in and develop the refactor, and develop an actual scalable model after I've got some money coming in. Because burning 206 months, and it's more than that. You said about 50K per month over 6 months. You're looking at about $500,000.
No. 50K total for both developers for the 2 months.
For 2 months.
Total, yeah.
Okay, but if you rate, let's run it out to 6 months, because you're looking to retain these people, aren't you?
To get like to full product.
Correct.
Yeah.
So even then, 2 months, say 50K, 100K, wherever you sit, with the designers in there, super super high price from my mindset, and maybe it's because I had like 1,000 to my name the last few times I was doing this. So I was like, not really hiring anybody. But no, I mean, I think that's a super realistic number, and I do agree with you. I think that would be the ideal. If I had the option and the funding, I would absolutely want that. You're going to get buy-in from that potential tech lead and somebody who could actually be a part of your company. Is you have to go and take on the other 1,000 jobs of being an owner kind of take place. So I absolutely agree on that front. Cool.
That didn't even touch the designers.
It didn't. I think the designers alone are probably going to be another couple grand per month, even if they're doing maybe $2-3 grand, $4 grand, something like that. If you're doing ad hoc work, or if you're doing full time, maybe $4 or $5 grand, something like that. Not too sure. How much do designers get paid nowadays?
Depends on where they are and how good they are, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I was thinking when I used to teach, a lot of the designers that would graduate out of college, I mean, you were getting jobs at big game companies and studios, which were very cyclical. So they do like the
Yes.
4-month game stint, and that whole time they'd be getting paid maybe like 18 an hour, 20 an hour, something like that. So it's pretty low. And I think
Ooh,
20 an
that's
hour was
low.
like 40K
That's here in the
annualized.
U.S.
In LA. In LA, yep.
In LA.
Yeah, I mean they're getting hired
No,
as temps.
I was so my first job out of college was as a 3D animator. Not tech at
Animators
all.
get paid better, I think.
Okay. But I was doing, and this was like forever ago.
Yep.
But
Aging ourselves,
close to 25 an hour.
I'd say 25 is
as-
the higher end I see.
But that was as a self-employed contractor, meaning no insurance, no anything, just that.
Yeah. I'd say a lot of the students I had would graduate and pull around the 18 to 22, 18 to 23, but a lot of them were 3D artists or they were more 3D, 2D designers, stuff like that.
And so for this though, I think you are going to need like a good designer to start with to kind of help build out the templates, but eventually that work is going to transition to more picking the best ones and more of just having an eye and doing real quick work. And so I think you need a lot more design up front, but that's going to very quickly drop down to a very low amount, I think.
So are you saying you're going to possibly need like an art director to come on board or somebody like a temp? Or you as the owner, are you taking the role of art director now too? Because I think that's probably what I would do. I think your business,
it depends again on your skill set. And you want to follow the rule about, is it more valuable for me to farm this out or to do it myself, right? And I think eventually you're going to have so much to do running the company, and probably you want to be interacting directly with the clients and things like that, that if you just have someone you can trust who has a good eye to just go in and say yes, 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 no, no, that I think because you've built out and you've invested in the engineering to build out that system, you can get that done for not a lot, I think.
I like that. Cool.
It might even be something you can get someone who's really good, who just wants to pad out their resume by saying, hey, I'm art director at XYZ, and really the work is minimal, right? Because all they're just going in, like, this is just what I'm saying. And so then, you maybe don't have to float them as much cash because the title and prestige is worth more.
Oh, the funny ways you actually incentivize things.
Yeah.
No, I think that's actually a really good call out. I think that's the best way to go about it as well. I think obviously you're the owner. You need to have your 2 cents. You need to trust this person ultimately.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that all makes sense. I'm trying to think. Did we miss anything on this when we were analyzing? There's so many
I think we've gone
thoughts.
pretty deep on this one. But there is another thing that I wanted to bring up. This is and we talked a little bit or avoided talking about the text. And it's one thing to make an ad that looks good. It's another thing to make an ad that speaks to your audience or knows who your audience is. And so this is maybe taking one side of the problem of marketing, but the whole other side of understanding your target audience, knowing what platforms they're on and where you should best advertise to them, it's a whole different side of things. And honestly, I think that's the more difficult side. Putting something together like this in Canva, I think this is within the ability of any small, medium business. Like, if they wanted to just create an ad, it's not going to cost them too much to find some freelancer, just say, okay, make me an ad real quick, right?
Yeah.
So this is going to save them a little bit, but it's not going to solve the real problem of how do I market my company, my business, how do I find my target audience, etc.
So you're calling out that using this platform, it's going to generate context without the contextual awareness of your clients and where you're advertising. Yes. So then when we look at the actual clickable page, don't they mention they support marketing channels? it says support your marketing channels. So I'm wondering if they're trying to address that contextual awareness by understanding, okay, if a business is marketing to Instagram, does it actually have context on the type of clientele that follows this person's channel or this business's channel? I doubt it. I have a feeling they're just saying they integrate and can auto-publish out to them, so they're doing something simple like that.
Theoretically, you could claim this because look, they're saying ad formats and sizes, right? Like, I think they're just saying like we can make a banner that fits like
and that's
whatever
what
size it needs to be. But I think that's heading in the direction that they eventually would want to go in. Is that level 1 is maybe building this that it automatically creates these ads, right?
Yeah.
But then level 2, auto publish, auto check the performance of the different ads, and start plugging in new ads, right? So that effectively each of your clients as Clickable has a different model running and attempting to create ads that best convert for their audience. And
I think that's going to be that's going to be critical for the success of Clickable. That's probably the number one thing that will retain your customers. Probably.
Obviously, that's a whole nother level.
All I know is,
but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, all I know is Clickable team. I hope you guys check this out. We should definitely plug it to you guys or send an email, because I have a feeling you guys spun up this landing page really quickly, and I'm going to call you guys out on it. I just looked up the source, and you guys are using TypeDream, which, so I have a feeling you're like one person sitting around that's developing this, and I hope you're more than that, and I hope you build this, because I want to see it. I want to use it. I can, again, be your test person, so reach out.
Awesome. All right. I think we've covered this quite thoroughly.
Yeah, I don't know how we went a full hour on that. That was pretty great.
So Eissa, thank you so much for doing this with me. It was a lot of fun. Everyone be sure to check out Eissa's channel, Journey to Programming.
Awesome. And thanks, Scott, for having me on. I think this was definitely a lot of fun. We went on a few tangents there, and I look forward to doing it again, man. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. All right. Talk to you soon.
Hey, bye.